Hello and welcome to today's Dwell Time. My name is April Preisler and I am the Associate Publisher of CleanLink. Today I am joined by Ryan Leafblad, Lysol Pro Solutions R&D Senior Manager, and Igor Ignatovich, Senior Microbiologist within the Equity, Claims, and Compliance Group at Reckitt. Brian and Igor, welcome. Today
Thank
we're
you.
going to be talking about a new study put out by Lysol Pro Solutions titled Journey of a Germ. Can you tell us more about your Journey of a Germ study, what its aim was, the methodology, and what it discovered?
Sure. So, in this study, we wanted to see how the objects that we carry with us, in this case, backpacks, accumulate various germs throughout the day. Basically, we had 5 volunteers. Each of them was carrying a backpack throughout business facilities for 2 days. And what they did, they set those backpacks on various surfaces throughout the course of the study. The surfaces we looked at were your working desk, your cafeteria floor, and the bathroom floor. What we did then is we sampled those contact surfaces on the backpacks for various bacteria and mold to measure the levels of contamination. We also utilized very selective media to kind of distinguish the classes of bacteria that we may be picking up. And at the end, we pulled all the samples together and we sent them for sequencing to get a deep dive into like everything really that we were picking up from all these multiple surfaces. And so some of the results of the study showed that throughout the course of the study, we were able to pick up hundreds of thousands of germs from all the surfaces. And when we looked at the surface by surface, we saw that we're really picking up as many germs from your working desk as from cafeteria floor or from the bathroom floor. And we actually saw even the presence of fecal bacteria on your working desk. Further analysis by sequencing revealed that we're even picking up some pathogens, including pathogens like E. coli or emergent pathogenic yeast Candida tropicalis, which can cause serious infections in immunocompromised people.
What are the implications of the findings for businesses that want to help protect their staff and customers?
I think there are a couple of implications that we wanted to talk about today. One of them is that I think just as people, as humans, we tend to think of certain areas or certain surfaces as gross or contaminated or where the germs are, but then we also think about other areas as safe or it's not such a big deal, right? We tend to compartmentalize really easily. So you're used to thinking of a bathroom as some place that is dirty, that I could pick up germs, and so therefore it needs to be cleaned and disinfected. But our other areas like an office space or a classroom or something, we may not necessarily think of them as dirty or as gross as a bathroom. And so we tend to separate that out and we pay extra attention to some areas and not others. But one of the things that this study showed us is how all of those spaces are interconnected. Right? As people move around in a building, as we're outside the building or we come in and then we move in different spaces within it, all of those spaces get connected by the behaviors that we all do, just our normal actions within a day. And it's everything from, in this case, we use backpacks, but it could be a purse or a briefcase or a computer or a cell phone or a water bottle or basically anything that we would touch one surface, transport somewhere else, and then touch another surface could do the exact same thing as what we saw happening with the backpacks here. So it's really about how interconnected all of these spaces and surfaces are in our building, which means ultimately that we need to think holistically about how we clean and disinfect a space in a building, that while we focus on something that we call high touch points or the hot spots in a building, everything else is also interconnected. So we need to make sure we're thinking about all of it. So that's one big aspect. The other implication for this really is that there's things that, bacteria, germs are so small we don't necessarily see them. So again, we tend to focus on those spaces where we have visible dirt. If there's dirt, grime, slime, something there visibly that you can see, that's where people tend to focus. But one thing that this study showed us is that there's as many microbes on your desk, like Igor just said a minute ago, as there would be on a bathroom floor. That's pretty nasty, right? But we don't think about that way. We just don't think about that. You know, we see a desk, we don't see physical dirt on our desk, so we tend to assume it's safe. And what do people do at their desk? They touch it. I mean, I eat at my desk pretty regularly. If my desk has bacteria on it that was transported there from another place of the building, and now I'm eating my lunch and I touch it, I have the potential of getting that bacteria, ingesting that bacteria, and I could potentially get sick from it. So it's really about just raising awareness that we need to pay attention to those spaces and places where people are operating the most in a building, because that's where they're going to interact with the surfaces, and how those spaces are then connected with other spaces in the building, which ultimately will lead us to what do we actually do about it.
So you kind of touched on this, but if items like backpacks can harbor so many germs, yet we use them regularly without getting sick, why should businesses care about these findings?
Yeah, and you're right. You know, we don't live in a cell world, right? We get exposed to the germs, microorganisms every day. But when it comes to pathogens, each of them will have its own infectious dose, which is basically the amount of pathogens that you have to be exposed to in order to get sick, either by ingestion or inhalation or through the open wound. And that could be like as low as just a few viral particles for like such viruses, let's say norovirus or Ebola virus, or a few microbial cells like some of their pathogenic strains of E. coli. And that dose is even lower for someone who is already sick or immunocompromised in some way. And so while we didn't really look at the transmission of the pathogens in this backpack study, the items that we handle every day, including the backpacks, you know, we move them around, we set them on the different surfaces. So these germs that these backpacks accumulate may eventually spread on other surfaces or on our hands or someone else's hands, and then we touch our face, and then we get in our mouth, and that can eventually lead us to getting sick.
Yeah, and people don't, you know, one thing I think people don't necessarily think about surfaces in the same way as we do other things, right? I mean, think about hand washing. That's something that, you know, not only just us, but CDC, WHO, health professionals, everybody's been talking about the need and effectiveness of hand washing for decades, right? It's something that people understand. If you go out and you're working in the garden, I mean, it's almost springtime. Hopefully things are going to start turning green again. If you're working in the garden, what's the first thing you'll do when you come back inside? Most likely wash your hands, right? Because you know you have dirt on it. But if you wash your hands after working in the garden, now you do other things around the house, 4 or 5 hours later, are your hands still clean? Right? I mean, we would never assume that. So people instinctively understand that their hands are going to continuously get dirty based on their activities throughout the day. So we would wash them more than once. Why would we only disinfect a surface once and expect it to last forever, right? It doesn't. And so that's one thing that this really reinforces, is that you don't know if a surface you've touched has enough microbes to reach that infectious dose level that Igor was just talking about by looking at it. So if we come in and disinfect it, that'll help at that point in time. It will disinfect it right then at that point in time. But then as we engage with that surface again throughout the day, it will get reinfected or potentially have more bacteria or viruses on it that were reintroduced from earlier. So that's part of why we care about studies like this, is because it helps show that just our normal behaviors, just the normal stuff we do in a day, we're actually reintroducing microbes into our own environment. So it's not like they're just external creatures that are coming after us. Our behaviors cause this. So we also then need to have behaviors to reduce or eliminate the problems as much as possible.
Sure. And that kind of leads into the next question of how does regular cleaning and disinfection help break the chain of infection of germs among items like backpacks, people, and surfaces?
Right. And so, you know, when we think about chain of infection, it's really a series of events, right? That all of this series of events have to occur in order for someone to get sick. You need to have a pathogen, you need to have a reservoir where the pathogen thrives, right? This can be a human, it can be an animal, any kind of soil, or your dirty surface. The pathogen has to somehow leave that reservoir, so it needs a portal of exit. It needs to be transmitted, so it has to have some kind of mode of transmission, and then a portal of entry and a susceptible host where this pathogen can then accumulate and amplify, and then the sequence will repeat again. So by tackling any of the links of this chain and breaking it, we can really slow down or stop the spread of infectious disease. And I think Brian can touch on where we can really tackle the chain of infection specifically.
Right. There's a couple things I would say to this. One, it starts with the products that you're using. All right. We don't necessarily know for sure what organisms are living on a particular surface. However, we can make some general guesses based on the population that's around, what type of business it is or building it is, what types of things tend to happen there. Right. If you think about an elementary school, for example, what are the most common illnesses that kids tend to come down with at school? Cold, flu, RSV, right? Those tend to be the most common ones that you hear about, or if you're a parent with kids, your kids are coming home sick and now you get it, right? So if we know in a particular environment or a particular business that those illnesses tend to be more prevalent in the people there, then what we would want to do is pick a product that has efficacy claims against those particular illness-causing organisms, right? So if we're in a school, we would want to use a disinfectant that has claims on it for cold, flu, RSV, at least, right? I mean, there's more to it than that, but we'd want to particularly pick those out. If you were in healthcare, you'd be a little more concerned about something like C. diff, right? In schools, we don't necessarily worry about it as much, but you would pick a product, look at the claims that are on that product, and it's all publicly available, right? Any product that has disinfection language or claims on it has to be registered with US EPA. So look on the bottle. There will be a spot on the bottle where it will list that EPA registration number for that particular product. You can hop on EPA's website. They have a search function on there. Put that number in. It will pull up something called the MTL, the master text label. On there, that will list all of the organisms that product is effective against and the usage instructions for how to do it right. So that's the first step, is you want to make sure you've got a product that's going to deliver the germ kill performance that you actually need for the particular environment that you're in. And then the second part, follow those usage instructions. If it's a concentrate that is supposed to be diluted in a certain way, follow it. Otherwise, you're not getting the right active ingredient concentration. If it says spray the surface, let it sit for 3 minutes. Spray the surface, make sure it stays wet, let it sit for 3 minutes. If you cut that short, you're not going to get the germ kill that you need. So those are a couple things that we need to pay attention to if we're going to break any of those chain of infection steps that Igor was talking about on surfaces. We have to make sure that the products and process that we're using actually work against the organisms that we care about.
So how should this study inform a business's approach to cleaning and disinfection?
There's two main things. One is part of what I talked about a little bit earlier about a holistic approach. Right? We need to, when you're creating a cleaning and disinfection program for a facility, you need to start by considering that entire facility. Right? Think about what are the different areas in the building? What does the population dynamics in that area look like? Is it one person? Is it two people? Is it 50? Is it 100? Is it the same 5 people that go into that office and so they work in that office and it's those 5 people all day long? Or is it something like a retail store or an arena where you may have a few hundred to tens of thousands of people and they're changing constantly, right? The more that population turns over in a space, the more chances you have for people to be bringing germs in and out, which then can be spread around the building. So it starts with really understanding how the space in your building is utilized, where the people are the most, and do the people that are in that space turn over? Within that, then you look at like what are the most commonly interacted or most commonly touched spaces, because those are the places where people are going to touch a surface, potentially pick up germs, and then get introduced into the body. So we focus first on those high touch point areas, the places that people touch the most. Things like countertops, where in a break room where everybody's going to go and fix their food for lunch, or doorknobs, door handles, copy machines if people are still using copy machines, a remote control for the audio visual equipment in a conference room where you're connecting in with somebody. All of those surfaces that people tend to touch most often are the ones you want to focus on first, and make sure that you're cleaning and disinfecting them regularly. All right, places that are touched less frequently still need to be done, though. That's the other part that this study shows about how everything is connected. If you look at a surface and say, well, we only touch this a few times a day, so I'm not going to worry about it, it's still connected by human behavior to the high touch point surfaces that you're going to go clean more often. So you need to do both of them, but you just tailor the spaces or the surfaces that are touched most frequently need to be cleaned more often. And the surfaces that are touched less frequently, you can clean those less frequently. So you kind of tailor your program for how often you're cleaning and disinfecting a space based on how it's used, while maintaining a holistic that we do need to do the entire space where people are going to be touching.
Well, this is all very interesting. Brian or Igor, do you have any final comments?
I don't know. For me, it's that maybe, just because it looks clean doesn't mean it's necessarily clean from a microbiology standpoint. And, for me, it was it's great to partner with Brian's team on the study, and they're looking forward to many more.
And just to build off of one thing that Igor was saying there, I mean, that visual evaluation of a surface, if people see a surface and it looks clean, they automatically think it is. Right? But to Igor's point, it isn't necessarily. Just because we can't see the dirt or the microbes on the surface doesn't mean that it's not there. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to go out and start spraying chemical and fogging and cleaning the ceilings and everything. This isn't about saying we got to clean and disinfect absolutely every single surface that's around you because you're going to get sick. That's not the case at all. It's really about understanding that just because a surface looks clean, it isn't. So let's make wise choices about what surfaces we clean and disinfect and how frequently, based on how people interact with those particular surfaces. And something as simple as washing your hands, taking a disinfecting wipe and wiping down your desk, taking a disinfecting all-purpose cleaner and cleaning the sink. Things like that are relatively easy and simple to do. And if you just follow the manufacturer's instructions for those particular products, it can make a big difference in that unseen dirt and germs that are on the surface, and just overall leads to protection.
Well, thank you, Brian and Igor, for joining me today. To find out more about this study, head to lysolprosolutions.com. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.